Yeah. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is your favorite warlock, practicing necromancer. And tonight I want to bring something to you that I think is a good thing. One of the biggest questions that I get from people is, where do I begin my studies? But also, what happens when you get burnt out? What do you do? Well, how about this? Switch it up. Okay. Look at your practice. You know, if you're following a wide range of things, like say for an example, I love to read. Okay, I love to read a wide range of things from parapsychology to psychology to philosophical books to occult books from demonolatry, Satanism, necromancy, and down into the Caribbean style, practices like Brujeria or Palo Mayumbi, Santeria, even. Okay. Now I left my Brujeria books at home, but right here to my right, I've got two bags of books. One is filled with the Necromyicon, and the other one is filled with Palo Mayumbi and Santeria books. Okay. Now, right here on my left, I've actually taken some of the books that I've been reading off and on, and they are Simon's Necromyicon series. Basically, the dead names of the Necromyicon, the Necromyicon, the gates of the Necromyicon, the seals, and so forth. Okay. Now, and then I have Lovecraft's books. His book right here. The I believe this was the commemorative edition, the best weird tales of H.P. Lovecraft. Yes, love this book. I'm not really a big fan of Donald Tyson's aspect of it, but at least he actually puts out a lot of gates and a lot of information as well, even though it may be a little far fetched. Sci-fi variation. uh, that's all right. I don't think it would do anything. Cyborg, and Jeanette, welcome. So, anyways, up until now, over the last week, I have been reading the 48 Laws of Power, really studying them. Okay. And I've also been reading basically a book that's how should I say this? I wouldn't call it a parapsychology type book, but it's more of the fact that it deals mostly with the psychological aspects of taxation. So you have the Fair Tax book, okay? And I've been kind of going back and forth between those over the last week, and I'm really learning a lot. I'm really enjoying that. And each time I read them, I get something new out of it. So even though it gets a little to that point where you're going, okay, I really don't want to freaking read this book any further. I've done it for a week. I've read, I'm on chapter 6 right now of the 48 Laws of Power. I'm on chapter 10 in the Fair Tax. Okay? Book. And then on top of that, you got the other books that I'm reading. Like this one here of H.P. Lovecraft. I'm on chapter 2. Okay? Because I just started reading this. I've gone through the introduction and everything of Simon's Necromyicon. I love this book, especially the rituals at the very end with the prayers. Freaking love that shit, man. So tonight I thought, you know what? I'm studying the Necromyicon, the old ones. I'm going down through everything on all 20 plus of these old ones. I've been going back and forth every other week, switching it up so that I don't get bored, I don't get overstimulated. I don't get into that little rut of going, oh, do I really have to delve back into this? No, I want to keep it fresh. So I get to go into things like this week. I get to go into this week. My favorite book is learning from the different legal aspects, if you will, of Palo Mayumbi. That's right, different denomination, different houses and such, going from the Congo region of Africa all the way down into South America, Central America, and North America. Yes, I freaking love it. So, anyways, we kind of got a little sidetracked over the last couple of days, namely because of my boy Duke over here. Yeah, he ended up having a paw injury. We thought it was a soft, tissue damage, but he ended up having a good sized little gash on his paw, which is why he wasn't eating, which he wasn't moving around and stuff like that. So I kind of took like a day or two off just from studying and everything, just to spend it with him and Opal and everything. You got to be that alpha. You got to be that head of the pack, if you will. And on top of that, spend time with my son and all that stuff. It's good to take a break every so often. That just kind of gave me the time that I needed to spend time with my family. But now it's back to reading, studying, and practicing. So it is a good thing for you to switch it up. It is a great thing for that. Now, as where to begin your practice, a lot of people still come to me and they ask that question a lot. It's one of the biggest things. How do I join? How do I join? It's like if you, this is basically right up there. And what's his name? Bob Carlson or Carlton or something like that. He's a comedian. I always think back to what he said in one of his comedy routines. He said, if you have the motivation to go out and seek out self-help books, then you have the motivation to delve into your studies and practice what you need, right? So, if that's the case, why do you keep asking the same fucking question? I don't get that. I've done videos, I don't know how many times in just the last year, where I mentioned this, where I've mentioned how to begin your practice. I've always said, number one, what interests you about that particular path, that religion, that philosophy? What authors have written on that? Hell, in quite a bit of cases, I've actually put out sources that in references that I would recommend to you. And yet people still come to me and they're kissing my ass going, I've watched all your videos. Really? If you had, then you have actually seen and heard me describe this stuff. Wow. All right. So I'm going to say this one last time. When you get into a religion, look at the creeds. Does it align with the way you believe? Does it align with your soul, your nature, your lifestyle? Does it speak to you internally? Number two, ask yourself, what is it about that particular religion or philosophy that interests you the most? Delve into Google. Go to your local library. Delve into the sources on those particular topics. Like I've been reading over the last year, I don't know how many freaking books. I estimated in the last 3 to 4 years reading roughly about 37 books a year. 37, that's right, you heard me. 37 books per year. Okay? That's how many books I've read in 1 year. Now you times that by four. That's over 1,800 and I want to say 62 books in a 4 year span. Constantly amping up my skills, my arsenal. My arsenal. I'm constantly updating myself and refreshing my memory of the paths that I'm interested in and that I practice. Okay. Now that's the other thing. Okay, when you find the religion or the philosophy that interests you, you've gone and done the research into that. By this stage, you should have a firm understanding about what you're about to get into. Then it's a matter, do you want to join a coven? Do you want to join a mosque? Do you want to join a temple? Do you want to join a church? You know? Um, if you're into necromancy, I do recommend the Temple of Mazajira to you. If you're into Satanism, I always stick with the classics. The COS, the Church of Satan, get into the traditional, ONA style if you like challenges. A lot of people, they have a misconception of what the ONA represented and what they did. They go back to the 18th century, and some claim that it goes back to the 17th century. Now, personally, I haven't found any evidence supporting the 17th century aspect yet, but they do go back to the 18th century. They were reintegrated, if you will, around the 1960s here in America. Now, this is what people get wrong. They think it's about neo-Nazism. They think it's about um, human trafficking and criminal activities. They obviously haven't read the material because if you've gone into the sinister tradition, it's about mastering yourself and the elements. It's about mastering your path. I've seen people who practice the ONA, and not just them, other people that love to challenge themselves. They'll take a backpack, fill them with rocks, literally rocks. It would be just like going into the armed services and getting hit by waves as you're holding a freaking gun above your head with your feet 6 inches off the fucking ground. You know? You're running through the wilderness with a backpack and all your survival gear on your back and your rifle in your hand in front of you. Same exact thing. But here's the kicker. The ONA is more about you bettering yourself. It's about you elevating your stature as a superhuman. It has nothing to do with criminal activity. In fact, out of all their works that they've done, it says nothing about slavehood. It says nothing about breaking and entering. It says nothing about crime whatsoever. So it's all about bettering yourself. So when you get into a tradition, what is it about that tradition that interests you? When I got into Palo Mayombe years ago, I was fascinated with the symbols. I was fascinated with the rites. But the more I got into it, the more books I got on it, the more I hung around my teacher, my elder, I began to understand it was a brotherhood. When you look at the Middle Eastern or Hermetic perspective of what a cabal is a brotherhood. That's basically what is like a church is. That's what a temple is. It's a brotherhood. It's a coven. It's a brotherhood. You guys are all working for the same fucking things. You're just showing your level of knowledge. You're showing your level of participation. You're showing your advances through the work. And a lot of these newbies, they don't get that, you know? So when you get into it, you're not going to treat it, you'll treat it as a game, a fad, that look at me, I'm a bad guy, type thing up front. But when you start getting serious about it, you become dedicated, you become committed, you start putting together a lifestyle, you start putting together a library, you start bringing in all these sources, and you start learning through mythology, anthropology, archaeological aspects, folklore, traditions, different belief structures in, say, for example, witchcraft or demons, demonology, maybe spiritualism. Is it a ancestral lineage like Santeria and voodoo, or is it more of a powerhouse type thing like Satanism or Palo Mayombe? What is it that attracts you to those religions, those philosophies? And the thing is that when I started getting serious about it, that's when I looked at it and said, hey, I'd like to get scratched. I'd like to get into this. And guess what? To this day, I still up my game by researching, by practicing. The only difference is now I practice necromancy full time as a practicing warlock, a practicing necromancer. In Santeria and Palo Mayombe, that type of practitioner is known as a Marimberos. They're very rare and not really liked in the communities, but they're very powerful. Kind of like a Bokor. And I had somebody come to me the other day and actually asked me if I knew a Bokor because they really wanted to get into voodoo and really needed to speak to a Bokor. Well, I just bumped him up to one of my elders and said, hey, check out this guy, get into this link, apply yourself, introduction type stuff. And so say, hey, send him an email. Whatever you guys talk about, that's on you. All I can do is open those doors. That's what an elder does. An elder is going to guide you. They're going to teach you. They're going to get you into that mind frame of this is a lifestyle. If you're into an ancestral lineage, like I said in voodoo, Santeria, Palo Mayombe type stuff, then you're going to be working with your ancestrals. Even in necromancy, you're working with your ancestors, and you're really pushing it there because you're going to be learning in that aspect. But it doesn't mean you can't work with a particular spirit. Let's say the Loa. I had somebody ask me once if it was all right to work with Papa Legba, and I said, yeah, you can do that. If he's the Loa that speaks to you, get to know him. Reach out to him. Get in there and really, how should I say this? Set up an altar for him. Learn, give him offerings, sacrifices, things that he really enjoys. Put the time and energy into it. And if you feel like you want to work with a different type of Loa down the road, just remember your studies, your practices, the lessons put forth. And just, that's how you get into this stuff, But it comes down to you getting serious with your work. It begins with study. It begins with setting up a lifestyle. You got to get to know the energies and the current. You got to delve yourself into the communities. And most importantly, you got to prove to your elders that you are learning. It doesn't matter the source of the material, as long as you back it up with like I said, anthropology, archaeological, historical, folklore, mythology, and so forth. When you get into a tradition, you will know that your elder is telling you true. Because all of these things that I just named off is going to be backed up. You're going to sit there and look at everything that he or she is telling you, and you're going to be laying it down on paper, and you're going to be looking at that going, maybe I should take better look at these sources, because all of them have said a lot about this, but these things here are different. That could be because there are different types of practitioners. If there are different practitioners, they have their own, setup, they have their own methods. There's nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to tradition and values, you got to go with the cultural. And like I said, that's in all of those things I just named off. But you got to be the one to put the work in. So, what happens when you get bored? When you get tired of reading the same shit? The same, material? Take a break. Switch it up. Get into something new. Like I said, over the last week, I was reading about the fair tax. I was reading about money and finances, investing. I was reading about the 48 laws of power. Applying to new jobs. And then this week, I'm getting back into Santeria, Palo Mayombe, and the Necromayicon. And it's kind of ironic because Iheke Wedding actually was talking about this yesterday in his TikTok, channel. He actually read let me see if I can bring it up here real fast. Where is it? I think it's right back here. All right. End of the Necromayicon. It's not that one. Just a second. I'm trying to do this with one hand here. Kind of a little pain in my butt. It's a brand new book. There it is. That's the one I was looking for. Let me just go back one more page. Yeah, he had mentioned it here, which I thought it was kind of cool. But my book is being a little pain here, so I do apologize. There we go. Let's see if I can find it real fast. Here's that one. Should be right around in here. Right here. It's on page 205. And it is Or Nippur. Iridu Kala. Or Kula, rather. Kesh Lagash. Shur Uppak Sila. Day of living, rising sun. Day of plenty, gracious sun. Day of perfect, grand delight. Day of fortune, brilliant night. O shining day, O laughing day, O day of life and love and luck. 7 oldest, 7 wisest ones. 7 sacred, learned ones. Be my guardians, polished swords. Be my watchful, patient lords. Protect me from the rubbish shoe. O shining, splendorous. Ap Kalhu. Wow. Gotta love that. You know? And then you find the one that's near, literally right at the very end. And I'll read that one too. But, E.A. Koetting didn't actually mention that one. But I found this one later on. But, because my other one was so bad that it was just ripped. The pages were just falling out. So I had to order a whole new Necronomicon by Simons. But this one here is at the very end, and I kind of liked it because it was by the Chaldean oracles of Zoroaster. And it says, "Stoop not down, therefore, unto the darkly splendid world, wherein continually lieth a faithless depth, and Hades wrapped in clouds, delighting in unintelligible images. Precipitous winding, a black, ever rolling abyss, ever espousing a body illuminous, formless, in void." And you know what? When you get into void working, like void meditations and everything, that really hits home. Just saying. But something for you to think about. But yeah, like I said, you really want to get into the works. I've got numerous authors out there that, have written about the Necronomicon, but I like the original stuff. I like my books and my religions like I like my food. I don't add anything that's not the original taste. You know what I'm saying? Because once you start fucking around with that, you'll never go back to the original. You're going to get into things that are tainted, things that are corrupted, and then you're not going to know what's real. So get H.P. Lovecraft stuff. His complete works. With the Necronomicon. Get into Simon stuff because he really put it into ritual. Ritualized setting from a Renaissance and medieval perspective. Even talked about the history of it and all the death that came from those who practiced and owned it. Very, very awesome stuff. So, and then, like I said, when you get into Pedro Mayambi Santeria, then you're going to get into the works by numerous authors there. If you can get your hands on the English variations, awesome. Especially if you don't speak Spanish or Cuban or some other language. So it's very, very good. And then it's always good to see the laws of the land and the laws of the Orisha, laws of the 21 principles, if you will, within Haitian voodoo. And you get to get that sense of each region and what they believe, what they follow from a legal perspective, and so forth. So that's what I recommend to you. And like I said, this is the last time I'm going to recommend this stuff and bring that stuff up to you. But like I said, it's always a good thing to switch it up every so often because it would be like you eating the same foods day in and day out. Like, say, if you ate nothing but SpaghettiOs every day, 3 meals a day, aren't you going to get sick of that? You know what I'm saying? So, why would you read the same book every fucking day? It is better to enhance your arsenal. It is better to further your education. And it is even better to get out there and apply it to your life. I've got maybe 9 books, and I've got to add more to that reading list because Kane Hustle just added, I think, 2, 3 more books recently in one of his most recent videos. Love what he's recommended. I do. I love it. And it's really furthering your education. It's furthering your imagination. It's furthering your thought forms of, wow, no wonder these books are being banned. No wonder they're worth like $150 to $300. No wonder most countries are banning them because they open up your mind. They reveal truth. And that's the thing. So anybody can write a book. Anybody can write a book. But how much of that book is based off truth, based off facts, history, mythology, folklore, archaeological, or even anthropology perspectives? How does it fit into a culture? How does it fit into a practice, a daily practice? Okay, and so forth. That's something that you've got to discern for yourself. Do you want the truth? Or do you want to just sit there and be spoon fed what people want you to believe? Do you want to be free or do you want to be a slave to a system? That's on you. But like I said, get into a religion, get into a philosophy, practice it, study it, and just, you know, eat bitter. Just eat bitter. Okay? It's the only way you're going to fucking grow. If you like what I put forth, if you like what I do, always, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button. And like I said, there's two things I always tell you guys. Whatever you preach, always back it up with numerous sources and always make yourself available to the public. All right? I want to thank Ryan for jumping on here, Rolls for jumping on here, Magic for jumping on here. I just happened to realize he jumped on here. I missed you, buddy. I apologize. Let's see. Jeanette, Cyborg, and Loveth. Or Love. But you know who you are. So, yeah. Thanks for jumping on here with me. I appreciate it. And like I said, just back up what you preach. And always, always make yourself available to the public because you are responsible for the things that you do and say. All right? Have a good night or a good day wherever you are in the world. And until next time, I'm out.